Hi, I'm Sarah Holmes to Castro at Do Yoga With Me. And this is a slower, gentle Hatha flow designed for all levels, lots of choices, lots of modifications offered. I'll be using a couple of props during the practice. One is a block, and that could be a folded blanket or a firm cushion at home. The other, a bolster. And there's a link below to make one of those for yourself with blankets at home if you'd like. I hope you enjoy the class. So as you're ready, we'll start our practice laying on our backs. So I'll invite you to come down to your back. And you might take a form sometimes called constructive rest, finding your knees about your hips distance apart. And finding a comfortable place to rest your arms. So it could be by your sides, or you may prefer resting your hands on your body some way. It's up to you. You might choose to have your eyes gently closed or softly open, whatever supports your awareness here as we have just a moment or two of settling in, the start of our practice. I'll invite you to take a couple of intentional breaths. Might be in through your nose, out through your mouth. Might be some other way. Just taking a couple of breaths to mark this transition from the rest of the day and into your practice time. When those breaths are done and there's no rush, then you just let your breath settle into its own rhythm. Starting to just gently shift into more sensing awareness. So you might start to notice points of contact between your body and the ground. So might be your feet resting in contact with the floor. Might be your low back or the back of your head. And over your next few breaths, you might just explore with a kind of a letting downness with your exhales. Maybe with each exhale, just inviting a sense of letting down into the support of the ground. You might use your awareness to just gently scan through your body, your muscles, and be noticing how everything's feeling in this moment. And you might also include noticing the movements of your breath in your body, wherever you notice that today. Might be your abdomen, or your ribs, or your chest. And knowing that at any point during practice you can come back to these anchors for awareness. Sensation, noticing your breath. As you feel ready, we could start to bring some movement in, just by starting with turning your head from side to side within your comfortable range today. You might go from side to side a few times. Some days might be smaller movement, some days might be larger movement. Maybe noticing sensations in the muscles of your neck. And as you're ready, bring your head back to center. You could also make some movements with legs. So I invite you to step your feet a little wider apart. And as you're ready, you could lean your legs from side to side. Nowhere to get to, just making movements within your easeful range today. You're welcome to stay just with legs, or for this next few cycles, bringing back in, turning your head, turning it the opposite way to your legs. It's finding a kind of a spiral. So you move your knees one way and your head the opposite way. And then from there, in your own time, finding your way back to center. And then bringing your knees towards your chest. And you may prefer to hold the front or the back of your knees. And just bringing a little bit of movement. Might be side to side for a few rolls, side to side. And then at some point, maybe making some circles with your knees. So you might decide taking your both knees in one direction for a few circles. Just using the contact of your low back against the ground to give a little bit of massage to your low back. At some point, switching up directions, taking a few cycles or circles the other way. And then from here, bringing your knees to center. And I invite you to keep your right knee in and see how it is to extend your left leg out. You may prefer to keep a little bend in your left knee. You may prefer to lengthen your left leg all the way out. Again, you could be holding in front of your knee, or to give your knee joint a little more space or comfort, you might prefer to hold behind your knee as well. And from here, just gently using strength of your arms to guide your right knee towards you. Your left leg might be lengthening out or with a bend. Taking a couple of breaths there. And then from here, if you like, adding in a little bit of core work here. So you might gather your lowest tummy muscles in a little bit. And then on your next inhale, maybe rolling your head, your shoulders a little up towards your knee. If you notice it would be useful, you might take one or even both hands to support behind your head, just so there's no tension coming into your neck. And you might explore with how much or how little you'd like the support of your other arm. Maybe exploring letting the work come from the center of your body for a breath or two. Maybe even hovering your left heel an inch or two above the ground if you like, breathing here. And when you're done, just resting down on that side, and we could switch that up to the other side. So in your time, you might bring your left knee in towards you, again holding front or behind of your knee. And then as you're ready, deciding if you'd like your right knee a little bit bent, or if you prefer to lengthen it all the way out. And then from here, using the strength of your arms to just gently hug your knee towards you for a couple of breaths. And then from here, if you'd like to on this side, knowing you're welcome to kind of pause or rest anytime during the practice. This is your practice. If you feel you'd like to on this side, that gentle engagement of your lowest tummy muscles, and then as you're ready, With your inhale, maybe rounding your forehead up towards your knee, adding one or even both hands behind your head to support your neck. Breathing here. If you're supporting your head, you might find your head resting back into your hands. For 2. And for 1. And as you're ready, one more time. You might gather your knees towards you. And then a little bit different this time. Again, a little bit of kind of core stabilizing, but more with our spiral lines of the body. So I invite you to bring your knees to a bend and kind of hugging your knees together. If that doesn't feel so comfortable, you could also, if you have a block or something available, if it gives you a little more space, you could also pop a block between your knees if that brings a little bit more comfort. So leaving that up to you. And then with your hands, touching together your fingertips, thumb tips, and keeping your elbows a little bit wide here. And then as you're ready, just starting your knees going in one direction, your hands going the other. And you might try your head following your knees, and then that's our flow. So just going from side to side. Your arms and hands going one direction, your head and your knees going the opposite direction, just flowing side to side. You might think about adding a little bit of a lift of your knees towards you at the outer edge of each movement, almost like you're kind of drawing the shape of a crescent moon or a little smile shape. Maybe using your awareness to just notice where muscles are kind of waking up or engaging with this movement. Your breath could be flowing, just natural breath. Always feeling welcome to come out of a movement sooner than I cue, whenever it works for you, or continuing on for a couple more to each side, just flowing side to side. And whenever you feel done with that, then one more time, finding that constructive rest. So you might bend your knees, your hands could rest out to the sides or on your body. Maybe taking a couple of full breaths here, breathing in all the way and exhaling all the air out. Just taking a couple that way. From here, as you feel ready, we're heading towards seated, so you might roll down onto one or other side. Find the support of your hand to find your way up towards sitting. And in sitting, you might choose some height. It could be a block or it could be a bolster, so whichever one gives some support for your body. Finding your way into some variation of seated. So that could be a variation of crossed legs. You might prefer to extend your legs if that works better today. So finding which option works for you and finding your seat. So that might involve a little bit of movement to find your way to center. Somewhere where you can find a sense of your lower body kind of settling. And if you like, exploring a gentle lengthening up through your spine. Again, your eyes could be gently closed or open, always your choice. Include a little bit of movement for our spine here. So with your next exhale, you might round your spine any amount. And with your inhale, bringing a lengthening, maybe even a little arch to your back. It's going back and forth, finding the rhythm of your breath. And letting your next movement, if you're with movement, come all the way to the end of that cycle, and when you're done with that, then you might find your way up to center. So as you're ready, we'll come into a side bending form, and you're welcome to take your right hand to the ground for support. It might be fingertips or palm, And as you're ready, your left arm, it might extend up, or if it suits your body better, you might keep your arm resting down. And taking some length with your inhale, and with your exhale, finding some kind of side stretch here. So you might decide you want to ease in or ease out of these forms according to what works in your body today. One way to experiment might be to notice the fullness of your breath, easing out of a form a little if you feel your breath gets kind of short or labored. As you're ready, coming back through center, and we could take that onto the other side. So you might have your palm or your fingertips resting, your opposite arm finding your length. And as you're ready, taking that length over for the other side. And then from here, taking your time to come back to center. And at center, resting your arm down. We could take a few rolls of shoulders. So you might sense a kind of a picking up of your shoulders, rolling them back and down. Even sequence this with your breath if you like. So it could be an inhale to lift your shoulders and an exhale to roll them back and down a couple of times at your pace. And then from here, I'm going to make a transition. So a couple of ways you could do that. You could be rolling forward over your knees to come to tabletop. You might prefer to bring your legs around to the side. And from tabletop, coming into a form that's often called child's pose. It could be with some height underneath your sitting bones, or you might prefer resting your heels towards your sit bones. If neither of those work in your body, you might just come to rest on your abdomen. Finding a place for your head to rest. Could be your hands, it could be the ground, it might be that you'd like a little more height under your head. And I invite you here to explore sending your breath into the back space of your body. So you might either sense or imagine breathing into the back of your lungs. Maybe noticing or imagining some movement in your back with your breath, your back ribs expanding as you breathe in. Everything softening back down as you breathe out, taking a few breaths that way. Knowing you're always welcome to include any small movements if that feels more useful than stillness. Here it might be a little bit of rocking side to side, or resting in stillness for a couple more breaths at your pace. And then from here, as you're ready, you might press into your hands and finding your way down onto resting on tummy. So lowering your way down. You could take a moment just to rest your head to your hands. You might just walk your legs a little further back to find a little more length in your torso. And then from here, I invite you to slide your hands back a little bit behind your shoulders, and with your breaths in, any amount lifting your head away from the ground. It's waking up muscles in low back, and with your breaths out, lowering down. So in this variation, inhaling, lifting, and exhaling, lowering down. In this variation, work coming from muscles that support spine rather than pressing into our hands. So you might just explore that for a few breaths. Some days it might be a larger movement, some days it might be just a millimeter or two. And the next time your head comes down, you could rest it to your hands or to the ground. And beginning some movements with our lower body. So again, you might sequence this with your breath as you next breathe in, lifting your right leg. And as you breathe out, lowering down and just flowing from side to side with your pace of breath. And the encouragement here is to explore more with length than with height. So we're more interested in keeping a stability to hips. So one way to think of that, not a whole lot of rocking from side to side as we make these movements. If you're still going with the movement, one more to each side. And then when you're done, just resting down for a moment, you might kind of wiggle your hips a little side to side to find a little bit of release, letting go of the muscles that were working. And then whenever you're ready, you might take your hands back under your shoulders. If you're taking care of any wrist injuries, might be your forearms, and pressing your way back through tabletop. Stabilizing work here, but starting with a few cat-cows. So you're welcome to have your hands kind of palms flat to the ground, or if it works better for your wrists to keep a straightness, you might be working on fists. And if neither of those work today, then you might come down to your forearms, take a modification there. So lots of options for this one. With your inhale breaths, I invite you to lengthen your chest forward, maybe a small lift to your head, and with your exhale breaths, you could find a rounding, any amount. As you breathe in, lengthening your chest forward, and as you breathe out, a rounding of your back. And just flowing back and forth a few times at your pace. If you'd like, experimenting with letting the pace of your breath decide the rhythm of the movement here. Knowing that it's always fine to pause or to rest or flowing for 2 more cycles at your pace. And eventually, whenever you're done with that, then you might find your way back to center, checking in with your knees. If you notice there's any tenderness, then you can always kind of loop your mat, give yourself a little bit of extra padding there. And finding somewhere that's a neutral spine, somewhere between that rounding and arching. And then from here, just getting a sense of your hips as kind of level as can be here. And then as you're ready, we might add a extending back of your right leg. The invitation is to explore keeping a stillness, a steadiness to your hips. You might decide you want to hang out here for a few breaths. Another possibility might be to extend your left arm forward for a few breaths. You might rest your eyes on one still point if that supports your focus. And whenever you're done and finding your way back down to the mat, we could do that on the other side. So this time as you're ready, as much as possible, experimenting with hips staying steady and sending your left leg back. So not too much changes elsewhere. in our body. And you might decide you want to stay with the leg variation, or you might want to experiment with lengthening your opposite arm forward for a few breaths. You can even try a kind of a smoothing out of your breath for the next few cycles if you like, finding a smoothness to your breath for 2. And for 1. And then as you're ready, if you had that little fold in your mat, you might unloop it. And we could find our way from here towards one of a couple of options. It might be sometimes called puppy dog. So it might be a stretching out of your hands and just sending your sitting bones back, kind of coming to a midway variation. Or you might prefer to come into a downward facing dog with your hands about shoulder distance apart and your feet about your hip distance apart, coming into a downward facing dog. So the choice is yours. More interested here in length in our spine than in straightness in knees. So you might even try a little bit of a bend in your knees to help you find some length in your spine. And then eventually from here, we could walk feet towards hands to come into some variation of a forward fold. And if today it feels better to have head a little higher, that might be a tabletop forward fold. You could press your hands to your shins, extending your chest forward, keeping more of a kind of a right angle. Your knees might be a little bent there. If you prefer, it could be a forward fold where you kind of dangle forward, bending your knees enough to let your body come close to your legs so there's no strain for your low back. Maybe if your head's dangling, it might be a little wiggle left and right, using the natural weight of your skull to bring a little lengthening to your neck. And then deciding how you'd like to come to standing. Some people's bodies move more readily by keeping length in spines. You might kind of support your way up with a long flat back, or you might roll your way up. Noticing what feels best in your body today. As you reach the top, you might circle your arms up overhead. You take a few of these together with your exhales, bringing your hands down through center. And with your inhales, circling your arms up overhead. Taking 2 more at your own pace, if you'd like. When you're done with your 2, then I invite you to find a variation of mountain form. Could be with your hands resting by your sides. You might prefer to rest one hand on your abdomen, one hand on your heart. And just noticing the alignment of your feet, finding your feet about your hips distance apart. You can even lift, spread your toes a little, give yourself a wider foundation in your feet. And then just noticing stacking of your hips and your shoulders and your head and skull, the top of your spine. Just taking a couple of breaths at center there. And then from there, preparing to step your right foot back. You can come into a couple of standing forms. So finding your right foot comfortable distance back, your left leg forward, and as you're ready, bending your front knee. You might notice if you can still kind of find some weight down into your back heel. And then for this variation of Warrior One, you may open your arms out forward or lengthening your arms up overhead. Again, maybe finding one steady point to rest your focus, your eyes. Breathing here for 2. And for 1. And then from here, if your arms are up overhead, you might rest them down and starting to shift your weight forward as you're ready to your front foot. So you might pick up your back heel so that you can kind of come into this little halfway lunge. And then just exploring balance here as you lean your weight forward into your front foot. You might just come to rest on the top of your toe behind you. You might lift your leg a little higher. Just seeing where you get to. As you lift your foot, coming towards perhaps a variation of Warrior 3, or just playing with having your balance mostly in your front foot. So lots of room to explore here. If you're lifting your back leg, you might notice that same kind of level quality to your hips that we were exploring in tabletop. Your arms could stay at your hips, or you can find a variation in your arms if you like, maybe lengthening your arms forward, knowing that it's fine to come in and out of these forms if you're exploring your balance today, or holding for a couple more breaths. And when you feel done exploring, then you might find your way back through your mountain, releasing your arms down. You could take that on the other side. So as you're ready, this time you might step your left foot back, placing your left foot down so that you can still press into your back heel, exploring where that distance between your feet needs to be. And as you're ready, bending your front knee, and then picking a variation for your arms. So it could be your arms resting down, out in front, or lengthening your arms up. And spending a couple of breaths here. If you like, you could sense into 4 corners of each foot. So see if you can find a whole perimeter of each foot pressing into the mat. And then from here, we could transition towards that balancing. So you might bring your hands to your hips. And as you pick up your back heel, starting to lean your weight into your front foot. One way to explore here might be just playing with leaning your weight into your front foot. That might just feel like the right place to be today. Another option might be to start to lift your back foot. So there's nowhere to get to. We're kind of exploring with curiosity. If you're starting to tilt forward into a Warrior 3 variation, you might again notice, check in with your hips. Notice if you can keep that same levelness to your hips. Choosing a variation for your arms, so it might be they dangle down, or you might extend your arms forward if you're coming into that Warrior 3 variation. Finding your breath within the shape, knowing it's fine to be coming in and out of the forms, or holding for 2, and for 1. And as you're ready, again, you might come back through center and releasing your arms down. Maybe giving everything a little bit of a wiggle or jiggle or shake. It could be your arms shaking. It could be your legs, a little bit of a shake. You might take your feet a little bit wider than hips distance, maybe a little bend in your knee, and bring in a little bit of a loose kind of spiraling shape. Allowing your arms to swing. If you're coming quite deeply into this variation, you might let your back heel lift as you spiral from side to side. It could be as vigorous or as gentle a movement as works in your body today for a few more cycles. And then from there, as you're done, just letting that come back to center, and one last time finding your mountain form. So your feet connected to the ground, your hands could be resting down, or taking a hand to abdomen, hand to heart. Taking a few breaths, your eyes could be open or closed. Just letting things settle for a moment. You might notice your breath in the front, back, and sides of your ribs. here, we could find ourselves into one last standing form, coming into tree. So you could step your feet a little closer together. And then starting to lean your weight into your left foot. As you come into tree, you might kind of notice again a stability in hips. For most of us, our hip comes out to the side a little. And you might explore with kind of keeping everything kind of contained at center. A couple of possibilities here in tree. You might take your right foot just to rest to the inside of your left ankle. You might bring it to below or above your knee, whatever suits your practice today. So lots of different variations. And then hands could support finding that midline of your body. You might bring your hands to center. Or if you feel you'd like to explore your center of balance today, you could even open your arms up. Maybe making some movements with your arms too, if you'd like to kind of challenge your balance today. It could be a lifting and lowering of your arms. For 2. And for 1. And then as you're done, just releasing your foot down, preparing for the other side by pressing your left foot into the floor. And then deciding, would you like your right foot might come to your inner ankle? You might take it to below or above your knee. I invite you to kind of check in with your outer right hip, and rather than have it kind of out to the side, you might engage your kind of side glute muscles, bringing everything to center, stabilizing muscles for our low back. And then deciding whether your arms could be at center or kind of opening your arms up. Maybe exploring your balance by moving your arms, adding in some movement, lifting arms up and down a couple of times. Just experimenting with switching up our center of balance. And when you're done, releasing your foot down. From here, we're preparing to find our way back down to the mat. So you might come down through a little bit of a flow. If you prefer, you could just find your way down kind of one knee at a time. As you're ready, inhaling, circling your arms up. And as you exhale, you might bend your knees a little, come down through your forward fold, could be halfway or all the way down. With your inhale to that tabletop flat back. And with your exhale, I welcome you to step back into either that down dog or lowering your knees for a few breaths in child's pose. So either option, child's or downward facing dog for a few breaths. Noticing what works best in your body in this moment. Finding your breath. And then if you were in downward facing dog, you might lower your knees and we could meet back in seated. So you might come down off, bringing your legs around to the front, and then we're finding our way back down towards our back. So a couple of options to get there. If your back is in need of a little more support today, you might take your hands, lower your way onto your elbows, support your way down. If you feel you'd like a little more kind of core engagement here, then you might kind of roll your way down, noticing if you can breathe and kind of release your way down slowly, eventually finding your body one way or the other, resting back on the ground. And then from here, bringing your heels towards your body. If you'd like to join me for a little back bend here, a little bridge, you could set your feet about hips distance apart, your feet pointing straight ahead, finding your arms resting down by the sides of your body. And then as you're ready, maybe lifting your hips a couple of inches above the ground, maybe continuing to press into your feet, lifting your hips higher. Finding your place that feels like a good balance of effort and ease for today. Option here might be to leave your hands resting as they are, maybe palms down, or if you prefer, sliding your shoulders a little closer together underneath and interlacing your fingers. Breathing here. You might consider hugging an imaginary kind of beach ball or basketball between your knees, engaging inner lines of your legs for support here. Feeling welcome to stay a few more breaths or to take rest sooner if you prefer. And whenever you're done, if your hands were clasped, you might gently just let them part. And slowly place your back down on the mat if it was lifted. And then from here, option to come into either the same variation or a single leg variation. So for single leg, you might bring your feet a little closer together, pressing down through both feet. And this time lifting your hips, again, any amount. And then from there, if you're coming into the single leg variation, again, keeping a sense of stability, leveling of your hips, kind of a sense of things being at center, you might explore just extending your right leg forward for a few breaths. Checking out that your hips are staying kind of level. You can still breathe there. When you're done, placing that foot down, pressing into your right foot so that you can engage, kind of steadying, stabilizing muscles, maybe extending your left leg forward. Using core muscles to kind of steady and keep hips level for a breath or two. And then whenever you're done on that side, or whether you're in the two-leg variation, when you're ready, lowering your body back down to the mat. And from here, we could start to wind things down with a little bit of a twist. So a couple of options. If you're not feeling super twisty bendy, you might bring your bolster or your kind of blanket bolster to one side of your body and taking your arms out wide. As you lower your knees down towards the right, it might be onto some height, so you might have some height stacked under your legs, or you might just find it's more comfortable to have your legs resting to the ground. It's up to you. Checking out that your legs are supported, they're not kind of dangling, so your body can settle. Might prefer your head at center or turning your head to one side. And then from here, if your head was turned, bringing it back to center, and in your time, taking your legs back through center. If you found it was useful having some height, you might switch it up for yourself so it's there for you on the other side. And then as you're ready, bringing your knees down towards the left. You might decide you'd like the height on this side. Maybe it wasn't useful on the first side, or conversely, you might rest your legs down, choosing the right support for this side. Again, your head could stay at center, or you might turn it the opposite direction to your knees for a few breaths. If you like, inviting a sense of gravity doing the work. So gravity letting your right shoulder and your legs become just a little heavier with each breath. And then from here, if your head was turned, returning your head and then your legs through center. And perhaps a last little hug of knees to chest. And then whenever you're ready, We could set up for a resting form, Shavasana. So one possibility might be to slide a bolster or a rolled blanket or some cushions, one underneath each leg, so that you have a little bit of a bend in your knees. For many people, brings a little more softness, spaciousness to sacrum and low back. Or you might prefer you just want to be laying with your legs extended flat on the ground. Another possibility can always be laying on your side, finding a place that truly feels like a comfortable resting form for today. If you feel it's useful to add a layer of clothing or any little adjustments to your head and neck and body, making any little adjustments you need to be as comfortable as you can in this moment. We'll be here for a few moments, so setting yourself up to be comfortable. Whether that means, again, having your eyes gently closed or softly open. I invite you, if it's useful for you, to take a couple of intentional breaths all the way in and full exhales out through your mouth or through your nose. A couple of full breaths. Letting those mark the end of any intentional control of your breath. Marking the end of control of muscles. The work of our practice is done. Letting your breath settle into its own rhythm here. If you notice your mind gets busier, knowing that it's not a problem, it's just part of the practice. If you find it useful to have an anchor for your awareness, you might just notice with each exhale that sensing into the energy of gravity. With each exhale, gravity supporting, resting here. You might notice the muscles of your face, if you'd like, inviting a sense of softening or relaxation, communicating rest to the whole of your body. We'll rest here for a few moments of quiet, and knowing, of course, you can adjust sooner. Otherwise, I'll kind of offer some suggestions around coming out at the end of that time. time, these next few breaths, to just gently scan through the muscles of your body. If you notice any unnecessary tension, you might take a few exhale breaths to just release or soften. Whole body resting from top of the head down to tips of your toes. And then as you feel ready, you might start to return your awareness and some smaller movements to maybe your fingers, your toes to begin. If it feels useful, you could gently deepen your breath for a few cycles, kind of a reviving breath. Your movements might start to get a little bigger. It might be your ankles, your wrists, maybe even some kind of stretch. Could be a long, yawning stretch some way. Eventually, finding your way back towards guiding your knees towards your body. You might be holding front or behind your knees. You could add a little bit of that rocking from side to side that we began our practice with. And eventually letting that roll you over onto your right side if that's comfortable, your left if better for you. And just taking a breath or two of transition, you might be noticing light, colors, shapes in the room around you. And then as you feel ready, using the strength of your arms to support your body as it returns to sitting, and finding any support you would like, bolster or block, to find your way back to your comfortable seat, whether that be crossed legs or some other variation. Taking a moment to reorganize your body and space. You might re-find that gentle length through your spine. Eyes might be open or closed. I invite you to take a closing gesture for your hands to kind of close your practice. Could be hands resting in your lap or drawing your hands together in front of the space of your heart. And just taking a few breaths for yourself as we transition back towards the day. Might check in, notice how you feel. If there's anything that you'd like to bring with you from your practice, from the work of your practice, back out into your day, maybe taking a breath or two to kind of affirm that. And if your eyes were closed as you're ready, gently blink them open. Thank you for sharing your yoga practice with me today. Namaste.